Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, sponsored by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Good day. Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab. Brian and I would like to talk to you about pending changes from Intuit, which they announced on June 10th, new QuickBooks pricing changes. Now, there's not only pricing changes, there's also some other strategy changes in the organization. And I want to disclose that Brian and I recorded this podcast before scaling new heights. We expect that we're going to talk to a lot of our professionals that are pro advisors that have sold these products for a lot of time, and we'll probably get additional insights. We'll have a future Accounting Technology Lab to discuss that topic. But we thought that the breaking news of the QuickBooks changes were important enough to discuss today. So, Brian, I know you've done a lot of processing on this and so forth. So what would you like our listeners to know?
Well, every year Intuit raises prices, and so this is not a huge shock. So we will kind of recap some of the price increases, but the major change that I kind of see here is that they seem to be kind of pulling away from the pro advisor channel almost. I'll go over, I'll highlight some very specific things associated with this, but it, generally, I've been watching the social media reaction to this, and I will tell you that it is unfavorable to say the least. Okay. Again, this was in a blog post on the Firm of the Future website. But basically, what's happening here is they are raising prices across the board between 10 and 20%, like they do every year. So QuickBooks Advanced is going from 200 to 235, plus the version that most of us use, the only version that really has location and class tracking and some of the inventory and some of the major features that you need to do advanced things, is going to $99 a month. Essentials is $65 a month, is going to $60 to $65. Simple Start is going from $30 to $35, and Self-Employed is going from $20 to $25. Now, this actually will take effect for new subscriptions on, for QBO, Self-Employed, Simple Start, Essentials, plus an advanced new subscriptions, or existing client build subscriptions on August 1st. The self-employed existing subscriptions will get pushed through on August 15th, and September 1st, all the accountant build subscriptions are going to go through here. So that's that's a pretty beefy price increase, and I don't think it's been that long since they raised price previously. I remember it's not been that long ago that Plus was $30 a month. So, and that's been years ago, but it's not been that long ago. Now, when we look at the payroll pricing, the thing that's really difficult here is the price per employee per month. That's the piece it's the add-ons that's kind of a challenge here. So payroll core is going to be $45, is going from $45 plus $6 per employee per month to $50 plus $6 per employee per month. For premium, they're going to $9 per employee per month, and for elite, they're going to $11 per employee per month. And again, those take effect for new subscriptions and client build subscriptions August 1st, for accountant build subscriptions on September 1st.
Mm-hmm. And so, Brian, each of those programs raised $5, 45 to 50 for core, 80 to 85 for premium, and 125 to 130 for payroll elite. And on the base system, there's no included employees, as I recall. Is that correct? So basically, you have not only the core pricing, but for a very small payroll, one or two, you're going to have pretty notable costs on the base system.
Yeah. So Intuit is in the process of sunsetting their desktop version of QuickBooks, the QuickBooks Pro, QuickBooks Premier, QuickBooks Mac. They switched it to subscription about a year or two ago, and they are now increasing prices aggressively, as we expected they would. Okay. Now they will actually stop selling new subscriptions to QuickBooks Desktop at the end of July this year, at the end of Intuit's fiscal year. So that's a pretty big deal that it won't be available at any price to a new customer. However, starting October 1st, the pricing on QuickBooks Pro Plus and Mac Plus is going from $649 to $999. Okay. And it's not been that many years ago that that Pro was a $199, $299 box you bought at Office Depot. And Premier Plus now is going from $949 for one user to $1,400 for one user. Okay. And if you think about that $1,400, you're not that far away from the $200 a month that you have for mid-market products with significantly more capability. So I just kind of call that out to you here, because as we saw with some of the other products they've killed off, the strategy appears to be that they're going to price it until you scream, and then they're going to keep pricing it until you switch to their cloud product. And that looks like what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, so Brian, you must have a beautiful crystal ball because you had forecast that there would be price increases. I was surprised how substantial these were
I
because
was actually surprised that they didn't double it. Okay. I figured they would have taken a lesson from the Windows XP extensions, where it was 99 for the first year and then 199 the second year. I was surprised that they didn't go to 1,300 and 2,000, honestly, on these.
yeah, but for our listeners, these are pretty radical price moves. And we hope you've listened to this podcast in time that you can adjust your client base to get a lot of these in, because we'd already talked in a prior technology podcast about the discontinuation date of July 31 for the desktop products, leaving only enterprise as the primary. But now that they're all subscription with notably increased dollars, I understand the maneuver here, and that's to get you over on QuickBooks Online. And the good news is QuickBooks Online Advanced has gained features to make it more on par with QuickBooks Desktop, but still not 100% parity.
But it's 100 a month. you know so it's not, these days of accounting software being a low percentage, a very small percentage of what you charge are coming to a close, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And Brian, to your point on the mid markets, just to give our listeners a bit of a sense of this, the primary mid-market products, Dynamics 365, Business Central, Sage Intacct, and NetSuite. The Dynamics 365 Business Central pricing is commonly coming in at $70 per user per month. So, when you start looking at mid-market pricing in those ranges, that really does change the tone. And when we look at competitors for QuickBooks Desktop, here I'll just call out Cyma and Spire, or Accounting Suite if you want a SaaS-based product. Those three products all have relatively good feature parity with QuickBooks Desktop at radically lower price points. So we've already been listening to firms looking to change and just not quite sure where to go.
Yeah, and I think Randy's right to call out those solutions, Accounting Suite, Spire, Dynamics 365 Business Central, and others, because those are what we call prop solutions. Okay. And they're, again, the idea here is they're kind of in the mezzanine between the entry level products that we have, like QuickBooks Zero and others, and the mid-market products like NetSuite and Intacct, where you've got to have a partner implement those things because of the sheer complexity and the number of options you have. So it's that this mezzanine of too big for QuickBooks but not big enough for NetSuite yet is a real thing. And so we think, we probably need to come back and talk about prop solutions again in the near future, just because I think generally that's where a lot of folks are going to end up heading. And some of the solutions in there you've never heard of or you don't know much about, but they are the products that we wish we could have gotten from the major vendors as part of this transition.
Yeah, so Brian is correct here because in this year's small business accounting presentation that he and I have written, we're actually covering 22 entry-level products and in the mid-market about 20. And, having just gone through NetSuite's year end, I don't consider myself a super negotiator, but in a half-hour call with NetSuite, we wound up getting the better part of $125,000 concession in a half-hour negotiation. It was like,
well, now it was like 3 days before year end though, too, right?
oh, it absolutely was, Brian.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, so this was not something you should expect you're going to be successful at in any time other than right around May 31st.
right. But the reason I bring that up is fiscal year ends on these public companies do make a difference on the timing of announcements like we're talking about with Intuit or on the transactions of making a purchase. So again, we want you to start getting your spidey senses up because if you're going to help clients or you're going to buy for yourself, you want to time your transactions.
Yeah, and so that means that if you have a particular product that's favored and you're doing a selection, you may want to push out the selection and the implementation a little bit to get more into these windows because the dealing is very real. Anyway, but let's get back to the QuickBooks accountant versions. You can see that the desktop accountant is going to $1,200 from $999. The Pro Advisor Premier Bundle, that is the base, just the base Pro Advisor bundle is $999 versus $799. And then the Enterprise Bundle, the thing that I used to pay $300 for 15 years ago, is now $1,600. Okay, so it is gone from $1,299 to $1,599. This is the one that has Pro, has the accountant edition, that has the enterprise accountant edition. Used to have point of sale, but that's not a problem anymore. And again, for one user, it's $1,600. So they're pushing, especially accountants, especially hard to get the heck out of desktop. Is my read on this. I mean, that $400 increase is, it's not quite 30%, but it's healthy.
And of course, Brian, as you pointed out correctly, October 1, 24 is the timing on this. So with many of our listeners in the thick of tax season for these cutover dates, the September 1 date that we talked about earlier in this podcast, the October 1 date and so forth, those are all kind of in play.
Yeah. So anyway, there's that. And now as we look at QuickBooks Enterprise, the big change here is that the Pro Advisor discount, the new Pro Advisor discount is changing, and on new additional enterprise subscriptions, there's no discount off of retail. Okay. And so if I get into my criminology here and my study of where Intuit's trying, mountain viewology, I guess you'd call it, I think that I think that they've got another couple of 3 years to bring QuickBooks Online Advanced up to the level of functionality that Enterprise has. And I think once they do that, this product will be sunset as well. So as I'm looking at this, based on this move, I just can't in good conscience, when I have people pick out accounting software, I have them pick out something, you've taught me this, Randy, that when you pick out accounting software, you're getting married for 10 years and you need to expect a 10-year life. And the problem we've got here is that I think based on this, if I'm the oncologist looking at this product doesn't have 10 years left to go. And so we've got to just acknowledge that this may not be a solution that you want to do new implementations on an ongoing forward basis. Now, you don't need to panic and dump it immediately, but I think you need to be thinking that there is going to have to be some kind of transaction to shift. If I made my best guess, I'd say they'll probably start the price increases aggressively in 2 to 3 years, and it'll probably be dead within 7. That's my guess.
So that's an interesting guess, Brian. And I was just reflecting on that because you're absolutely right. I like 7 to 10 year windows on any accounting software deployment. So then the next trick is, how we get the data out of these systems. So we have recorded other technology podcasts on products like Sender or Transaction Pro Importer or many of the other
And by the
products.
way, Transaction Pro is owned by WriteWorks, which owns CPA Practice Advisor, and we get no editorial direction from the WriteWorks people at all. So we are editorially independent. But I will say Transaction Pro, I say this as somebody that has never gotten a free copy of it, that has always paid good green money for it. Transaction Pro is an absolute lifesaver for these desktop exports and extractions and setups and so forth.
Yeah, Brian, I appreciate that because you know that having watched me evolve over the last 5 to 7 years, I've continued to maintain fierce independence. And there have been times when, we've watched others not disclose. So I appreciate your disclosure that, hey, we weren't told to say that.
And I can tell you definitively that at the point, I can't speak for you, Randy, but I can say that I would have to evaluate my continuation if I got aggressive editorial direction from folks outside the editorial command chain in this organization.
Yeah.
And Gail would never do that. Gail would never ever put us in that situation. She would resign before she would fold like that.
Yeah. So, the key here though, as you're listening to us, we love the company, the product. But this pricing is actually causing us to stop and think. And many of you have made the jump to QuickBooks Online and are quite satisfied with that environment. But for those of you who are still in the QuickBooks desktop environment, these prices are aggressive. Frankly, even the prices in QuickBooks Online are aggressive.
And the hits just keep on coming because here's the payroll pricing. And the basic payroll is going from 40 a month to 55 a month, and they're going from 6 per employee to 7 per employee for the basic payroll, again, where you do your own taxes. And then for the enhanced, it is going from 55 a month to 70 a month, and then $6 to $7 in there. And so, again, and their discounts, you basically get the whole year if you pay for 10 months and you pay in advance. So it's $550 annually versus 55 a month. But again, that's pretty significant there.
And, on that comment, Brian, I understand profitability to stockholders, the responsibility there. But I would also say the other payroll competitors that Brian and I will point you to, many are owned by private equity now, and we have seen radical payroll price increases from almost every vendor that's been purchased. So I'm not going to name names in this context, but we've seen payroll go from $2 to $4 cost to CPA firms to $10 to $12 cost per CPA firms. Well, going from 2 to 12 just seems like a lot for not a lot more technology, performance, and all that stuff.
That pain requires some kind of pain reliever that comes with the prescription. I mean, that's not an over the counter problem. It's time to think about, it's time to rethink your life choices at that point.
Yeah. So we will continue to talk to you about alternatives in this payroll. So Brian, again, sorry to interrupt your payroll conversation because you're headed for the next one, which has got
the legacy
just keeps coming.
The legacy payroll for unlimited goes from $850 annually to $1,100 annually, or again 85 a month, or to $110 a month. The direct deposit P goes from $4 a month to $5 a month. The legacy enhanced payroll goes from $650 to $850 annually, or 65 a month or 85 a month, to from $4 to $5. So starting in January, there will be new fees applying when paying W-2 employees via direct deposit in QuickBooks Legacy Enhanced. So there are transaction fees to be named later. Okay. There's also some ACH fees, and this is the one that really kind of galls me, especially in the era of, and I hate to be a nattering nabob of negativism here, but I think that some of these changes are just because they can, as opposed to be because they reflect any kind of change in the market. For example, the ACH fee for new customers for desktop payments, that is when you're paying payables, are going to go from $3 per transaction to 1% with a cap of $15 per transaction for existing customers. For new customers, it's going to be 1% with no cap. Okay, so this means that if you pay $10,000 to a vendor, like, let's say I got $10,000 in receivables from K2 Enterprises, and Randy wants to pay me that $10,000 via QuickBooks payments, it's going to be $100 in expense for him to send me $10,000 via ACH. I mean, I think Western Union might be cheaper in that situation. I don't know. That's the part that again, I guess we're looking at here, that I would call out to you here, is that I don't think, in the past, we used to have a saying in the banking IT world that nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. Okay. And in the small business accounting world, nobody ever got fired for buying QuickBooks. Okay. But I think that I don't think that we can. I think we've got to think differently today than we did in the past. And I think we've got to look at some of these fees. Now, I hope that Intuit has some changes or has some clarification that maybe we're missing, that we're not seeing in the email that came out. I hope that there's something incorrect here that I'm not seeing. But in general, I think we've got to evaluate, is this the long-term business partner I want? And are these the kinds of price increases that are sustainable in my business for my costs? And I don't know the answer to that.
I don't either, but I'm just reflecting on these ACH fees, because, if you were a local community bank charging $100 for an ACH of $10,000, you'd lose a customer.
And you'd probably get a visit from the Federal Trade Commission too.
Most likely. So, I'm thinking about alternatives, which we talked about in prior podcasts, like Forwardly or other providers like a Quick Fee as an example. And we know that those,
or Melio.
And we can go on and on and on about the alternatives. And I know I'm understating it, but in a predecessor podcast, we also talked about the FedNow charges. And we know FedNow may have per transaction costs of less than a dime. So I'm mentally thinking this through and saying, oh my, 1%, no limit.
1% versus a dime. I mean, that's multiple orders of magnitude difference. And I get that you got to have margins, but there's good sense to all things.
Yeah, I was going to say, Brian and I probably are both capitalists, and we want everybody to make money, but we don't particularly care for usury fees, which could be happening here.
And the troubling part here is that this really is taking advantage of Main Street. And I am much more protective of Main Street than I am of Wall Street. If we were talking about SAP taking advantage of the Fortune 500, hey, your big boys, figure it out. Okay. But I feel much different about, especially in this private equity funded era, about Main Street. And so I hope you see from this conversation that we try to call it the way we see it. We may see it differently than you, and we hope we do. We hope you do. Okay, you need to do your own thinking. But what we want you to see is that this is we're seeing enough frustration out of the people that we talked to that knew this was coming at Engage, and the people that we're seeing on social media that are Intuit advocates that are maybe not as much of advocates as they were in the past. I think you're seeing a shift in the industry where QuickBooks may no longer be the default. And I don't know what the replacement is yet, but there will be a replacement. And maybe it's Xero, maybe it's Accounting Suite, maybe it's FreshBooks, maybe it's I don't know what it's going to be. But I think it's time. I think there are enough people, especially at that accounting mashup, the thought leader event, that there were the practitioners in there were just seething. I mean, the anger was, you could see the shift in their faces when they spoke about frustrations with their CAS platforms. And so I think there's I think we live in interesting times, to go back to our ancient Chinese curse we spoke of earlier.
Yeah, and Brian, this is like the sixth time I've thought about it in your podcast. But my phrase is, "Who you gonna call?" Right?
Got the
Because,
Ghostbusters problem, baby.
so as it turns out, Brian and I are going to do the best we can to be the Ghostbusters for you, because we're going to try to give you alternatives. Not saying you should adopt those alternatives, but we want you to be aware of choices that might benefit you and your clients.
And I hope you see that we will always call it the way we see it, even if that is not popular, and even if that is not to our own personal advantage. We are independent, and we're going to call it the way we see it every day, or I'll go home and play with my dogs and my bees.
Well, Brian, I almost hate to ask for a parting thought. You've done such a nice job of summarizing the issues and illustrating those. Obviously, we're going to get more education. This is just based on the email announcement of June 10th sent by Intuit from the Tucson group. You should look in your email for that details. But we thought that this summary explained in the Accounting Technology podcast would be more clear and give you a little bit of tone, because if you're busy, you might have just looked at that and said, "Oh, price increases, no big deal." Maybe it is a big deal.
These are not normal price increases.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
thank you. We appreciate you being with us for another Accounting Technology podcast. We'll come back and be defenders of the galaxy with you in the next episodes.
Randy, that's no moon.
All
Have
the
a good
best.
one.
All the best to all of you.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.